Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. The giant Ghost King's cultivation base was back, and of the 3 devas who opposed him, he had killed 1, and apparently captured 2. It happened so quickly that there was no way for the 3 great clans to know what had happened, much less the 6 heavenly marquises back in Giant Ghost City. Right now, the rebels in Giant Ghost City felt very alarmed as they sat and waited to find out what would happen. If the giant Ghost King had simply died, then there would have been much less to worry about. But he had been rescued by Bai Xiaochun, a fact which hung over the heads of the rebels like a sharp blade. They could only hope that the 3 diva patriarchs would manage to find the giant Ghost King and kill him in time. As for those who had not openly rebelled, they also trembled in fear. After all, despite not having participated in the insurrection, they had tacitly approved by not opposing it, a fact they could not deny. Every group in the city was feeling a lot of pressure. The streets were virtually empty, with all of the soul cultivators remaining in their own residences, waiting to see what would happen in the end. As for the armies of the 6 heavenly marquises, their hearts trembled with apprehension, and yet, they continued to search the city high and low. After all, no one could say for sure whether or not the giant Ghost King who had escaped was another clone. Although it was unlikely that his true self was still hiding in the city, they couldn't take any chances. As for the 6 heavenly marquises, they all wore very grim expressions as they gathered for a meeting in a grand hall somewhere in the city. However, not much was said as they all sat there. Most of them were just looking off into the sky, waiting for news from the 3 devas. The giant Ghost King is very weak, and although that Bai Xiaochun is very crafty and vicious, his cultivation base is just too low. This time, he'll definitely lose. The giant Ghost King only has so much soul blood to use. No matter how they tried to console themselves, though, their hearts were all pounding in fear. Meanwhile, not too far away from the city, there were 2 mountain peaks, upon each of which sat an old man. One of them was Duke Netherworld, and the other was Duke Deathcrier. Both had fears of their own, and waited anxiously to see what would happen. Both knew that their fates no longer rested in their own hands. As for which would live and which would die, it would be determined by what happened between the 3 devas and the giant Ghost King. If the devas of the 3 great clans prevailed, then Duke Deathcrier would have no choice but to submit to them. On the other hand, Duke Netherworld would face much more severe consequences if he came out on bottom. The 2 heavenly dukes had ceased fighting, and would only occasionally eye each other. The only purpose the 2 of them served right now in the larger conflict was to prevent the other from being part of the action. The city was filled with intense pressure, and everyone was very nervous. Time ticked by. Soon it was evening, and the sky burned with red light, almost as if the clouds were on fire. As it did, the pressure weighing down on the hearts of everyone present seemed to grow stronger. It was in that moment that the red clouds in the sky began to seethe. In the blink of an eye, intense rumbling like thunder filled the area, seemingly descended from the highest heavens. Rumble. The lands began to quake physically, and within the city, everyone looked up in shock. The 6 heavenly marquises exchanged glances but didn't say anything to each other, and instead just kept looking up into the sky. Off in the distance, Duke Deathcrier and Duke Netherworld also looked up, their expressions mixtures of nervousness and anticipation. Then, Duke Netherworld's face fell, and a look of unprecedented disbelief appeared in his eyes. As for Duke Deathcrier, his eyes lit up with joy, and he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. One reacted with shock, the other with delight. As they did, a peal of thunder erupted in the sky above. Crack! It seemed louder than all other sounds in the world, and as it rang out, the people in the city felt their minds reeling. Looking up, they saw a massive rift being torn open in the sky. It was fully 3,000 meters from one end to the other. It was as if a huge, invisible blade had sliced the air open, after which a black wind erupted out from inside. Then, 2 people emerged. The first one wore a royal crown, and had a violet robe with a serpentine dragon on it. As soon as he appeared, everything began to tremble violently, and countless peals of thunder filled the air. Clearly, this person was so powerful he could crush everything in the world. His eyes seemed to contain the ability to suck in all the light in the world, making everything around him dark and colorless. A new pressure began to weigh down on the city, a pressure which vastly surpassed the pressure from moments ago. All of the soul cultivators in the city began to tremble, and at some point, people began to cry out loud. The giant Ghost King. Giant Ghost King is back. We offer respectful greetings, Giant Ghost King. Instantly, the 6 rebellious heavenly marquises in the Grand Hall realized what had happened, and their faces drained of blood. Blank expressions could be seen on their faces, along with bleak despair. They had been beaten, utterly and thoroughly beaten. Considering the level of their cultivation bases, it only took a single glance to confirm that the giant ghost king was completely recovered. They could well imagine the fate of the 3 diva patriarchs from the great clans, and had no doubts about how miserable their ends had been. Gasps could be heard throughout the city as countless eyes peered out at the dazzling figure hovering in the air nearby. However, in addition to the glorious giant ghost king, there was also Bai Xiaochun. Overwhelmed with excitement, he did his best to keep his breathing under control as he looked down at the city. Not too long ago, he had been running like a rat through the city as people tried to kill him. Now, he returned at the peak of glory, leaving him feeling extremely smug and proud. All of a sudden, he stepped forward so that he was in front the giant ghost king. Looking down at the city, he shouted, "Listen up, everyone. The 3 leaders of the clans that dared to offend their superiors have been removed from power. His Highness the King is back. When exactly do you plan to step forward and offer formal greetings?" In response to his words, everyone trembled, and within moments, countless individuals nervously flew up into the air, where they began to kowtow to the giant ghost king. "We offer respectful greetings, giant ghost king. We offer respectful greetings, giant ghost king." In the blink of an eye, countless soul cultivators appeared, all of them offering greetings, their voices combining into a cacophonous roar that rose to the highest heavens. As for the 6 heavenly marquises, their faces were as ashen as death, and their eyes filled with despair. They knew that they had no hope of escaping, nor any ability to fight back, so therefore they simply dropped to their knees to kowtow. As for the 4 heavenly marquises who had done nothing during the insurrection, they tremblingly appeared to offer greetings, flustered and fearful. At the same time, 2 beams of light shot toward the city from off in the distance. They were Duke Deathcrier and Duke Netherworld. As for Duke Deathcrier, he excitedly clasped hands and gave a deep bow. "Greetings, Your Highness," he said. In contrast, Duke Netherworld seemed extremely worried. However, he didn't rashly try to flee. He knew that such action was pointless, and would lead only to death. The only slight chance he had at living came with not fleeing. Face ashen, he dropped down to kowtow. Complete tumult filled the city as countless respectful cries of greeting rose up. The giant ghost king looked out with an expressionless face, not saying even a word as he surveyed the city with icy eyes. The truth was that he didn't need to say anything. His mere presence would crush any remnants of the rebellion. Bai Xiaochun's excitement grew at the sight of what was happening, but he didn't forget about how the giant ghost king needed to maintain his dignity. After casting a surreptitious glance at him, Bai Xiaochun made his decision about what to do next. Clasping his hands behind his back, he looked down at the crowds in the city and loudly declared, "Bring me the rebels." He was immediately pleased with how incisive and threatening his words were. In response, the 4 heavenly marquises who had not participated in the rebellion rushed over to seal the cultivation bases of the 6 guilty marquises. The 6 guilty marquises did nothing to fight back. Within the blink of an eye, they were on their knees and incapable of moving. As for Duke Deathcrier, he waved his finger, sealing the cultivation base of Duke Netherworld, who merely looked on bitterly as it happened. The subordinates of the 6 heavenly marquises could not escape, and were soon captured and rounded up by the forces of the other 4. The giant ghost king watched all of this happen with cold eyes, but nothing more. Inside, he was actually quite pleased with how Bai Xiaochun was handling things. Stepping forward, he appeared in the location where the giant ghost statue had existed, where he waved his hand. Ripples flowed out, and time seemed to move in reverse. Crumbled stones flowed back up into the air, and in the blink of an eye, the statue had reformed. The royal palace and its grand hall were back in place, and all damage to the statue was healed. Within moments, the giant ghost statue and the royal palace were back in place as if they had never been destroyed. "I'm back," the giant ghost king said, his first words since returning. "Giant Ghost King has returned. Giant Ghost King. Giant Ghost King." In response, countless voices joined together in a mighty cheer. As for Bai Xiaochun, his voice could also be heard in the cheering, as if he were the one leading it all. Bai Xiaochun's emotions surged under the tide of reverent cheering. Although he was a bit envious of how powerful the giant Ghost King was, he was also excited by the fact that he had definitely won a big victory of his own. He quickly hurried over to stand next to the giant ghost king, making sure to look like the picture of a loyal servant, glancing around vigilantly in case any rebels might dare make a move. Although his actions were clearly melodramatic, not a single hint of derision could be seen in anyone's eyes. In fact, most people seemed envious, and clearly wished that they could be in Bai Xiaochun's place. All of them trembled with the knowledge that this Bai Hao was going to make a meteoric rise. He was like a calm breeze that had been transformed into a dragon, and would soar to the highest height. The 4 heavenly marquises who had not joined the rebellion were now looking at Bai Xiaochun with very serious looks. Even Duke Deathcrier was sighing inside. He knew that the giant Ghost King now cared deeply about this Bai Hao. Obviously, the giant Ghost King took note of Bai Xiaochun's exaggerated protectiveness. Although no reaction could be seen on the outside, in his heart, he wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Now that his cultivation base was back to normal, this Bai Hao seemed very different from before. Shaking his head, he said, "Bai Hao, you take care of everything out here. Duke Deathcrier, you come with me." With that, he turned and headed toward the grand hall in the royal palace. "Yes, your highness," Bai Xiaochun said loudly, feeling very pleased at his sudden, newfound power. Duke Deathcrier sighed. Waving his hand, he pulled the taciturn Duke Netherworld with him as he left. As he did, he happened to notice how intently Bai Xiaochun was looking at the rebel Duke, as if weighing him to try to decide if he might pose a threat. That left him grimacing inwardly at how exaggerated this Bai Hao was acting. However, he didn't let that show on his face. Instead, he gave Bai Xiaochun a friendly smile, nodded, and then flew into the royal palace. Pleased, Bai Xiaochun looked away. Unable to prevent a feeling of pride from rising up in his heart, he laughed inwardly. Ha ha ha, I, Bai Xiaochun, am truly too outstanding. Even devas have no choice but to give me friendly smiles. Feeling in incredibly high spirits, Bai Xiaochun clasped his hands behind his back as he hovered there in the air near the giant ghost statue, looking down his nose at all the people down below. Moments later, the 4 loyal heavenly marquises all flew up to him, smiling ingratiatingly and offering respectful bows of greeting. We heard before that you were a mighty hero with superb talents, brother Bai Hao. But today, the rumors were proved false. You're not just a mighty hero, you're a dragon amongst men, incomparable under the heavens. Listen, old pal, I happen to have a jade pendant with a 15-fold spirit enhancement. A mere glance at you, and I can tell that you and this pendant were destined for each other. Please, I beg of you to accept it. That's right, brother Bai Hao. Your battle with those 3 devas will make you famous throughout all the wildlands. Do you know how many elite heroes exist in the territory of the Arch-Emperor who could possibly compare with you, brother Bai Hao? I'll tell you, none. Brother Bai Hao, you don't have a mansion in Giant Ghost City yet, do you? Well, don't worry, I already made all the preparations for you. I really hope you'll kindly accept my offer." Of the 3 diva traders, brother Bai Hao seriously injured 2, and destroyed the fleshly body of the other. Brother Bai Hao, you are definitely the number 1 chosen in all of the wildlands. In fact, I think that you are the only one worthy to use this particular magical item. All of the 4 heavenly marquises were offering gifts along with their fawning words. On any other occasion, they wouldn't even think to act like this, but right now, they were very nervous, and in their efforts to start out on the right foot with this Bai Hao, the words spilled out of their mouths without end. "Oh, stop exaggerating," Bai Xiaochun said with a chuckle. "I did it all in the service of His Highness the King. There's no need for this, you 4. Despite his courteous words, he didn't hesitate at all to continue taking the gifts they were offering. When the 4 heavenly marquises saw that he was accepting their gifts, they sighed in relief. They continued to shower him with praise until the entire group was on intimate terms. In fact, not only did they continue to give him gifts, but they also all extended invitations to their homes for formal visits. Feeling very pleased with himself, Bai Xiaochun licked his lips and continued to chat with them for a bit. Then he waved his sleeve, calling upon the name of the giant Ghost King to have the 6 rebel marquises sent away to Devil Penitentiary. Next, he incarcerated other key figures among the rebels, and passed down orders to get the city back in order. The businesses in the city were repaired, and armies were sent to the 3 great clans with orders to keep them under strict lockdown. Although everything didn't proceed completely smoothly, there were no major problems. Having accomplished these things, Bai Xiaochun reassembled the city guard to make sure that public order was maintained. After that, he stationed himself outside of the grand hall in the royal palace, looking like the picture of a vigilant guard. By this point, the giant Ghost King and Duke Deathcrier had been meeting in private for some time, presumably talking about matters pertaining to the rebellion. From this, Bai Xiaochun could see that Duke Deathcrier was obviously the only diva who was loyal to the king, and had actually fought on his side. However, that actually caused his vigilance to grow. Duke Deathcrier is a diva, and has a higher standing than me. I should be able to get a general sense of the giant Ghost King's attitude from him, right? As he stood there thinking, night fell. Eventually, Duke Deathcrier emerged from the Grand Hall, lingering traces of excitement visible on his face. As soon as he saw Bai Xiaochun, his eyes sparkled, and a smile appeared on his face. Bai Xiaochun hurried over and clasped hands formally. "Greetings, Duke Deathcrier." Duke Deathcrier laughed heartily, and before Bai Xiaochun could even bow, he said, "There's no need for such formality, Majordomo Bai. You've truly performed a meritorious service today, and have opened up countless opportunities for yourself. Considering that the rebellion in Giant Ghost City was just put down, there are many, many things to do. You and I will need to work together closely in the future, Majordomo Bai, and we'll definitely have quite a bit to discuss later on." When Bai Xiaochun heard himself being addressed as Majordomo, he was a bit stunned. However, he still managed to have a short, polite conversation with the smiling Duke Deathcrier before the man turned and vanished. At that point, Bai Xiaochun sighed with relief. It was then that the Giant Ghost King summoned him into the Grand Hall itself. Spirits lifting already, Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and hurried inside. When he saw the imposing, awe-inspiring Giant Ghost King sitting there in his throne, he quickly bowed his head in respect. "How are things going out in the city?" the Giant Ghost King asked. The way his eyes seemed to flash like lightning caused Bai Xiaochun to suddenly feel very nervous. Quickly clasping his hands, he said in a loud voice, "Normally speaking, the chaos in Giant Ghost City would have been very difficult to sort through. Thankfully, your highness is wise and powerful, unparalleled under heaven. Therefore, a single word from you, coupled with a single glance, are like the might of the heavens." Everyone was left in fear and reverence, and couldn't stop thinking about how wonderful things had been living under your reign. The hearts of the people truly belong to you. Because of all that, handling matters out in the city went very smoothly. Even as he spoke, Bai Xiaochun looked out of the corner of his eye to see the Giant Ghost King's reaction. Originally, the Giant Ghost King's face had been a mask of solemnity. However, upon hearing Bai Xiaochun's words, his cheek twitched, and some of that solemnity vanished. By this point, he could see that this Bai Hao was apparently addicted to flattery. However, deep in his heart, the Giant Ghost King actually enjoyed hearing such words. After all, no one had ever spoken to him in such a fashion before. "Don't waste your energy on useless talk like that," he said. "Your cultivation base isn't high enough, Bai Hao. You need to focus more on your cultivation, do you understand?" When the Giant Ghost King thought about how this Bai Hao had used a single drop of soul blood to unleash a demigod-level attack, though, he couldn't help but marvel. When Bai Xiaochun saw the look on the Giant Ghost King's face, he breathed an inward sigh of relief, and said, "Don't worry, your highness. Sir, your cultivation base is unrivaled and unparalleled. Over the past few days, I gained a lot of enlightenment from observing how you breathed. Furthermore, I was left completely shaken by how powerful you are now that you've recovered. In fact, I hope to go into secluded meditation very soon so that I can make my next breakthrough. Your highness, I definitely won't lose any face for you. Although, I've offended a lot of people. I'm worried that if I go into secluded meditation, enemies will come out of the woodwork looking for revenge." 1. By the time he reached the end of his short speech, a worried frown could be seen on his face, seemingly placed there accidentally, as if he had become so wrapped up in speaking that he lost control of his facial expression. When the Giant Ghost King saw the look on his face, he seemed a bit nonplussed. However, it was obvious what Bai Xiaochun was getting at. He wanted a position of power. Whatever. Listen, from now on you're a majordomo, alright?" With that, he waved his hand to dismiss Bai Xiaochun. When Bai Xiaochun heard that he was being made a majordomo, he wasn't quite sure what that entailed. However, he was already excited, and feeling a bit more at ease. "Your highness," he said quickly, "the 3 great clans dared to rebel against you, and even tried to kill me. They're really a bunch of villains." He blinked a few times to emphasize his words. Of course, the reason he was bringing up the 3 clans wasn't because he wanted to target them, but rather, he wanted to highlight how much effort he had put into keeping the Giant Ghost King safe from them. The Giant Ghost King looked at Bai Xiaochun and then snorted coldly. Although he didn't say anything, an icy glint could be seen in his eyes. At that point, Bai Xiaochun chose not to say anything else, and simply turned to leave. Outside of the Grand Hall, the wind was blowing, and although he still felt a bit of a chill going up his spine, he breathed a long sigh of relief. Although the conversation had gone smoothly moments ago, he had been very nervous the entire time. After all, the Giant Ghost King seemed very moody, and also very difficult to read. "At least I know that flattery works. Many pretenses can be seen through, but not the flattery of Bai Xiaochun." He looked up in thought for a moment, and decided that he would need to do more of this in the future. Then he thought back to how the 4 heavenly marquises and everyone else had treated him, and he was very happy. As long as I keep the giant ghost king happy, then who in the wild lands will ever dare to provoke me? I've got the giant ghost king to back me up. 1. The breathing here refers to how cultivators use unique breathing exercises to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. At a certain point, a person would naturally breathe in a certain fashion whether or not they were conscious. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun got more excited than ever. By now, the moon hung in the night sky outside as he flew out of the giant ghost statue, feeling very pleased at his recent successes. I never asked to be so outstanding. But I guess there's just no other way. It must be the will of the heavens. First, I was destined to be the glorious junior patriarch of the river-defying sect. Then I became a major general at the Great Wall. And now, here in the wildlands, I'm yet again achieving a monolithic rise to prominence. Feeling a bit annoyed about how outstanding he was, he shook his head and did nothing to conceal his feeling of pride. In the past, Bai Xiaochun had been able to fly in the city because he was a prison guard. However, he had never felt completely comfortable doing so. After all, if he had run into a patrol of city guards, they could have forced him down to the ground if they felt like it. But now, the patrolling guards all looked at him with extreme respect, and even clasped hands in greeting before clustering around him protectively. Although Bai Xiaochun was initially taken aback, he quickly warmed to the arrangement. Clearing his throat, he took out a jade slip which he studied very quickly, and then clasped his hands behind his back and headed off in the direction of the mansion the heavenly marquis had gifted him. It was located in the inner city, and had once been a secondary home to that heavenly marquis. It was rather large, with ornamental rocks, as well as streams and ponds. There was a spell formation protecting it, making it very quiet and peaceful. There were already servants waiting there for him, who immediately offered respectful greetings. Bai Xiaochun was very, very pleased with all of the arrangements, and couldn't help but sigh in contentment as he entered the mansion. The night passed uneventfully. Bai Xiaochun didn't immediately merge with the metal-type diva soul. That 5th diva soul was of incredible importance. Merging with it would end with him stepping into the nascent soul stage, which meant that he wanted to do it when in secluded meditation. However, now was obviously not the time for a session of secluded meditation. For one thing, it was the following day that the official announcement was made regarding Bai Xiaochun's appointment to Majordomo. The news spread like wildfire, leading to widespread astonishment. Majordomo. I can't believe Bai Hao was actually appointed to be Majordomo. We've never had a Majordomo in Giant Ghost City before. Majordomo. Majordomo. On the one hand, that could imply that he's in charge of everything in the city. But on the other hand, it could also imply that he's in charge of nothing. It's like something between a real appointment and an honorary one. His true power will depend on his favor with the king. And at the moment, Bai Hao has the king's complete favor. Even as everyone in the city began to ponder what true powers came with the position of Majordomo, Bai Xiaochun was pondering whether or not he should go out and bask in his newfound glory a bit. Before he could, though, people began showing up to offer formal greetings. It started with the 4 heavenly marquises, and then turned into an endless stream of soul cultivators. Virtually all of the groups and organizations in the city sent people to him. All of them came bearing gifts, which Bai Xiaochun accepted with great shock and surprise. The sight of so many gifts left him speechless, and at the same time, radiant with happiness. The most impressive of the gifts was the very mansion in which he now lived. The heavenly marquis who had given it to him was named Chen Hai. He was a rather fat man whose face was always covered with a radiant smile when he saw Bai Xiaochun. Apparently, the man didn't care at all about matters of cultivation base or status. He was being very sincere and welcoming. Of course, with Bai Xiaochun's sudden rise in status, Zhou Yixing and Li Feng also benefited greatly. That was especially true of Zhou Yixing, who had provided vital services to Bai Xiaochun. Now that Bai Xiaochun was back in all his glory, Zhou Yixing hurried over excitedly to offer greetings. Bai Xiaochun knew that he had been through difficult times recently, and therefore encouraged him to take advantage of the situation to set up his own power structure within the city. Zhou Yixing left excited and beaming with contentment. He wasted no time in using the fact that he was backed by Bai Xiaochun to start recruiting his own group of loyalists. A few days later, the stream of visitors began to thin out, and Bai Xiaochun finally had the time to go for a walk in the city. Wherever he went, the soul cultivators would greet him with immense respect, causing him to excitedly stroll about in every corner of the city that he could find. Well met, Majordomo Bai. Greetings, Majordomo Bai. Look, it's Majordomo Bai. The more people he heard talking about Majordomo Bai, the more he strutted about and basked in the glory. In a manner that was very reminiscent of the spirit stream sect, he would sometimes clear his throat to draw the attention of people to alert them that Majordomo Bai had arrived. Bai Xiaochun was completely intoxicated by the attention he was receiving. In fact, he even decided to go visit Devil Penitentiary. Although Warden Li Shu wasn't very happy about it, he had no choice but to offer respectful greetings, and then lead Bai Xiaochun on an inspection of the prison. As for Bai Xiaochun, he loved the reversal of roles, and made sure to point out many important areas of concern as they went through the facilities. The 4 deputy wardens and 4 dark inquisitors all clustered around him, feeling somewhat dazzled. It was almost hard for them to wrap their minds around the fact that this person had started out as a guard, then become a prisoner, and was now a majordomo. Most stunned of all was Deputy Warden Sun Peng from Cell Block D. However, Bai Xiaochun was the type of person who remembered his old friends, and heaped quite a bit of praise onto Cell Block D. Sun Peng was soon flush with excitement. Of everyone in the prison, it was the guards from Squad 9 whom Bai Xiaochun was most fond of. He even called the captain out by name to escort him. It was a huge honor that got the entire squad very excited. Sighing, he said, "I really have a lot of good memories in Devil Penitentiary. This was once my home, and the place where my feelings run the deepest." Everyone seemed moved by his words. Soon, the group had arrived in Cell Block D itself, where they stopped in front of his old quarters. At that point, a look of reminiscence appeared on his face. "A mere look at this place and I almost want to give up my current position and go back to being a guard." As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone hurriedly encouraged him not to do such a thing. "Majordomo, sir, you absolutely mustn't do anything of the sort. There are myriad affairs of state for you to deal with. With your position, you are responsible for the prosperity of all of Giant Ghost City." "That's right, Majordomo. The prison guards of Giant Ghost City can't do without their Majordomo." After hearing all of their persuasive words, Bai Xiaochun sighed a bit helplessly. Whatever," he said. "Now that all of you put it that way, I guess I have no choice but to give up on my dream. Everything I do for His Highness the King. Everything I do for Giant Ghost City." Solemn expressions overtook the faces of everyone present, and it was even possible to see teardrops glistening in more than a few eyes. Bai Xiaochun cleared his throat. Worried that his reveling in success had pushed things too far, he decided to wrap up the inspection tour. Just when he was about to leave, he looked over at Li Shu, who had worn a very odd, borderline unsightly expression this entire time. During the whole tour, Li Shu's expression hadn't changed at all, a fact that Bai Xiaochun wasn't too pleased about. Looking a bit irritated, he said, "Li Shu, I have to offer a word of criticism. In His Highness the King's moment of danger, I was the only one around to keep him safe. Where exactly were you at that time?" After a moment of silence, Li Shu gritted his teeth and said, "That day, I went to see Duke Deathcrier." Bai Xiaochun's eyes suddenly turned very cold as he stared at Li Shu and said, "In His Highness the King's moment of danger, you went to Duke Deathcrier? Are those the actions of a true loyalist, Li Shu?" Li Shu's face fell. He could see how cold Bai Xiaochun's eyes were, and realized that he had erred in his comportment earlier. Bai Xiaochun obviously wasn't irritated by his facial expression, but by his general refusal to perk up. Realizing that he had offended Bai Xiaochun, and cognizant of Bai Xiaochun's current status, Li Shu immediately felt deep regret. Clasping hands respectfully, he began to offer further explanations. Bai Xiaochun wasn't the type to hold endless grudges, and didn't bear any deep-seated ill will toward Li Shu. Therefore, to see him acting like this in front of a crowd actually left Bai Xiaochun feeling a bit uncomfortable. Seeing that the man had learned his lesson, and was now being a bit humble, he nodded faintly and then finished with the inspection. Over the following few days, Bai Xiaochun spent all of his time strolling about the city to bask in glory. Of course, he couldn't forget how the 3 great clans, and especially the Bai clan, had worked so hard to see him dead. He was not the type to seek revenge over the smallest grievance, but considering he had power at his disposal, the thought of what the 3 great clans had done left him feeling quite angry. However, the Giant Ghost King seemed to have different plans. Other than killing the Kai clan patriarch, and keeping the Bai and Chen clan patriarchs captive, he didn't seem to have any plans to deal with the clans themselves. After a few days, Bai Xiaochun started to lose patience, and hinted to the people in the city who were particularly loyal to him that it was time to put the 3 great clans in their place. A few more days went by. The Giant Ghost King eventually summoned Bai Xiaochun and rebuked him for simply strutting around all day and doing nothing. Afterward, Bai Xiaochun sulked back to his mansion and went into secluded meditation. Sighing, he pulled out his diva soul and began to cultivate. It wasn't that he had forgotten about cultivation. It was just that, now that he was Majordomo Bai, he couldn't help but revel in his new position. After all, he had been forced to keep a low profile in Giant Ghost City for so long, that the chance to swagger a bit in the open was too much to refuse. The past days of seeing Bai Xiaochun using his connections to intimidate everyone in the city left the Giant Ghost King with a much clearer understanding of his personality. The wily little fox. Sometimes he seems like a profound schemer capable of the most vicious tactics. But other times he's more like a kid. The Giant Ghost King shook his head. By this point, he actually felt much more comfortable about having Bai Xiaochun around. Although he was a bit frustrating sometimes, that was only because he enjoyed attention. Overall, he wasn't the type of person who would betray others. Besides, everything that he was enjoying now had resulted because of kindness from the Giant Ghost King. As for how he had secretly begun to act aggressively toward the three great clans, the Giant Ghost King didn't really care about that at all. It was a minor matter as far as he was concerned. However, he's definitely too lazy when it comes to practicing cultivation. Without some pressure, he won't even go into meditation. He obviously likes to enjoy life. Even the Giant Ghost King wasn't aware of the fact that, after bringing Bai Xiaochun back to Giant Ghost City, he had begun to treat him differently than others. Meanwhile, in Bai Xiaochun's secluded meditation chamber, he was suppressing all of his pride at his new appointment. His eyes began to grow calm as he looked at the Diva Soul in his hand. This is the last Diva Soul I need. Merge with it, and my 5 elements Diva Soul set will be complete. At that point, I will be able to break through. Eyes shining with excitement, he took the Diva Soul and pushed it into his chest. Rumble. Almost instantly, his aura began to condense in on itself, and his cultivation base began to rotate rapidly. A familiar feeling rose up inside him, making it feel almost as if he were being split into pieces. Even as he sat there cross-legged, afterimages appeared around him. At the moment, it looked like his true self was sitting there with 4 other versions of himself in the same spot. Time passed. Slowly but surely, a 5th afterimage appeared, until it was completely clear. Rumbling sounds filled his mind as he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then waved his hands through the air. Emerge, my clones. RUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUUU pressure weighed down on all 6 versions of Bai Xiaochun. All of his clones were in the great circle of core formation, and together, they could rock early nascent soul stage cultivators. Although he still didn't have his Heaven-Dao nascent soul yet, he was already capable of unleashing heaven-shaking, earth-shattering power. Next is the Heaven-Dao nascent soul stage, he thought, his eyes shining brightly. Reaching the Heaven-Dao nascent soul stage was supremely difficult. That difficulty lay in the fact that not only did one have to get 5 diva souls, but each of those souls also had to represent a different one of the 5 elements. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Only with a complete set could one succeed. It really was a very difficult matter. In the lands of Heavenspan, diva souls were very rare, and it was only by chance that Bai Xiaochun had begun to collect them. He had been given one in the Spirit Stream sect, and then gifted one by Du Lingfei. However, it was only when it came to the 3rd soul that he had been forced to work hard to get it. After putting his life on the line, he got the 3rd soul in the labyrinth, after which he had been teleported deep into the wildlands. Then, to get his 4th diva soul, he had risked everything, and also offended the Bai clan. Then came the final soul, which he got only after a long and bitter struggle. Even as he merged with the diva soul and formed his 5th clone, he thought back to what had happened recently, and felt lingering fear in his heart. Then he looked around at his 5 clones, took a deep breath, and thought back to the information on the stone stele in the labyrinth, which had described how to break through to the Heaven-Dao nascent soul stage. Bring all 5 clones into one's body, merge them with the true self. Break out of gold core and into nascent soul. He closed his eyes to concentrate. This matter was of vital importance, and no mistakes could be tolerated. After getting his thoughts in order, his eyes opened again, and they shone with determination. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Let's begin with my metal clone. He unleashed the power of his cultivation base, causing the fluctuations of the great circle of the gold core stage to erupt out. Even as the pressure of his gold core weighed down in the area, Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone brightly, and he looked over at his metal-type diva soul clone. The metal-type clone looked over at his true self and gave a slight nod. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he turned into a beam of gold-colored light that shot toward Bai Xiaochun's forehead. As it drew close, it began to crumble into fragments, sending dazzling light out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it merged into Bai Xiaochun's forehead, where it became the power of metal, surging through his body. Rumbling sounds filled his mind, and he began to tremble visibly as he sensed the metal-type power swirl through him and then pound into his gold core. His gold core trembled as an aura appeared therein that could only be described as a mystery within a mystery. It seemed to contain profound levels of life force, which spread out through him and began to transform him. At the same time, golden magical symbols appeared all around his gold core, causing his face to radiate an air of profound holiness. However, before long, the golden magical symbols began to fade away, replaced by a desolate bleakness. It was almost as if the power of metal itself was too strong, and under its pressure, his gold core was beginning to crumble into destruction. In fact, even his chi passageways didn't seem capable of handling that level of metal-type power, and began to fall apart. If things continued on in this fashion, it would only be a few moments before Bai Xiaochun was destroyed in body and soul. In that moment of crisis, Bai Xiaochun's eyes snapped open, revealing a gaze as sharp as a sword, which swiveled onto his fire clone. Vital energy defeats that which is solid. Fire restrains metal, he roared. At the same time, his fire clone's eyes sparkled brightly, bursting into crimson flames that shot toward Bai Xiaochun and merged into his forehead. Instantly, the power of metal within him was restrained as the power of fire coursed through him. The metal-type power in his chi vessels was suppressed, and the power of fire shot toward his gold core. Rumbling could be heard as the power of fire turned into a sea of flames that surrounded his gold core and then began to pour into it. Instantly, the golden magical symbols began to glitter brightly as the power of metal was replaced by the power of fire, making it impossible to harm his gold core. However, although the power of metal had been suppressed, the power of fire was now posing just as much danger to his gold core. In the blink of an eye, his gold core became a fire core, radiating such intense heat that Bai Xiaochun immediately began to sweat. It was as if there were a sea of flames sealed up inside of him that was so powerful it could destroy everything in the area if it exploded out. The sensation of deadly crisis he felt now was no less than before. In fact, it was greater. However, Bai Xiaochun remained calm. Now was not the moment to lose control. Looking over at his water clone, he shouted, "The many defeat the few. Water restrains fire." Rumbling could be heard as his water clone became a stream of blue light, within which was a drop of blue liquid, a drop that seemingly contained unending amounts of water. Within the blink of an eye, the drop of water had reached Bai Xiaochun and merged into him. As the power of water began to flow through him, it suppressed the power of fire as surely as a bucket of ice-cold water would suppress a spark. Within moments, it was flowing into the fire core, and yet, the sensation of danger was still there. Soon, Bai Xiaochun was filled with the power of water, and it felt as if he were going to be liquefied. It was as if a corrosive force were eating at his bones, filling him with intense pain. At that point, his eyes turned completely bloodshot as he shouted, "The real defeats the illusory. Earth restrains water." His earth clone merged into him, causing earth-type power to spread out through his body. Focus defeats dissemination. Wood restrains earth. Intense rumbling sounds filled him as his wood clone merged into him. As of this moment, he had all 5 types of power inside of him. The power of earth was suppressed, and the power of wood exploded out, transforming his core into a wood core. However, Bai Xiaochun wasn't alarmed at all by the danger he felt. Eyes shining with anticipation, he shouted, "The unyielding defeats the soft. Metal restrains wood." As soon as the words left his mouth, the metal-type power which had been suppressed inside his core erupted out, restraining the power of wood. Then, the resurging power of metal was suppressed by the power of fire, which was suppressed by the power of water, which was suppressed by the power of earth, which was suppressed by the power of wood. A perfect cycle was completed inside of Bai Xiaochun's gold core, which began to rotate with the full power of all 5 elements. This was why the Heaven-Dao nascent soul required all of the 5 elements Diva souls. With even one missing, no complete cycle would be created, and the person making the cultivation base breakthrough attempt would be destroyed. Only when the great circle of the 5 elements was completed would a perfect cycle be created. After 9 complete revolutions, Bai Xiaochun let out a howl that could shake heaven and earth. As he did, his cultivation base began to grow with terrifying speed. His gold core shattered, and the resulting pieces rapidly formed together, to form a small person who looked exactly like Bai Xiaochun. That small person was his nascent soul. Its eyes were closed, and it shone with 5 dazzling colors. The power of the 5 elements surged through him, and at the same time, a shocking aura appeared within his nascent soul. If any other nascent soul cultivator were here to witness the spectacle, they would cry out in alarm. After all, when an ordinary cultivator used their own core to form their nascent soul, it would be called a mortal Dao nascent soul. It would be difficult to see clearly, almost as if it were immortal. If someone used Diva Beast souls to create a nascent soul, it would be more clearly visible. Furthermore, based on the latent talent and technique practiced by the individual, it would consist of power of one of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, or earth. Furthermore, it would result in a divine light which swirled around the body. Generally speaking, that was the limit. Only the legendary Heaven-Dao nascent soul could be considered the perfect and flawless version, as clear as crystal, and filled with the divine light of the 5 elements. Such life essence divine light could not be suppressed by any technique based on the 5 elements. Furthermore, when it was unleashed, it could suppress all other types of nascent souls. Whether they were those of mortal Dao or those created by Diva Beast souls, they would all be crushed. Any other cultivator in the same cultivation stage as a Heaven-Dao nascent soul expert would be, at best, a third as powerful. In fact, they might even be so weak that they couldn't rotate their cultivation base. There were virtually no such nascent souls in the entire world. This was the Heaven-Dao nascent soul. As the nascent soul's eyes opened, a massive clap of thunder rang out in the sky over Giant Ghost City. Crash. In that same moment, a burst of Heaven-Dao aura erupted from within Bai Xiaochun's nascent soul, seemingly in coordination with the heavenly thunder. The great circle of the 5 elements. Heaven-Dao nascent soul. Bai Xiaochun was bubbling over with excitement. As his eyes opened, he could feel how his gold core had become a nascent soul. The tiny person that was his nascent soul sat cross-legged, radiating a holy aura and a sensation of the Tao of the heavens. Anyone who could observe this nascent soul would definitely be deeply shocked. Boundless fluctuations rolled out from the nascent soul, surging through his chi passageways, filling him with the indescribable power of his cultivation base. Bai Xiaochun shivered as he looked around to find everything slightly different than before. The world was brighter and more colorful. He felt completely different, as though he had been baptized. In fact, the boundless sensation he now got from his cultivation base reinforced the fact that he was now completely and utterly different from before. In fact, he was now confident that if he met the chief of the Bai clan, he would be able to crush him with a single palm strike. So, this is the Heaven-Dao nascent soul stage, huh? In fact, Bai Xiaochun was also excited to realize that, even though it was hard to accept, he was most likely far more powerful than most ordinary nascent soul cultivators. From what he could tell, a mere breath on his part could shake everything in the area, and a glance from his eyes could become corporeal pressure that would suppress anyone he looked at. Most importantly, his divine sense was now completely different from before. It was now connected to his spirit and soul, and made it possible for him to perform minor teleportations. What's the range of my divine sense, I wonder? Even upon simply releasing it, it went out 5 kilometers in every direction. He could sense everything happening within that area. However, he could tell that 5 kilometers was not his limit, and sent out some more divine sense. Rumbling sounds filled him as it shot out to a range of 50 kilometers. Even that didn't seem to be the limit. He was tempted to keep pushing it out further, but in the end, decided not to. After all, he was in the wildlands, and didn't want to push things too far. Restraint was the safest option. So strong, he thought, retracting his divine sense. As of this point, he felt much more powerful in all aspects. However, what got him even more excited than everything so far was that when he probed his own life force, it pulsed with a boundlessness of shocking nature, which immediately pushed him to the brink of losing control of his emotions. My life force, heavens. My longevity. Even at this early stage one can tell that I'll be able to live for thousands of years. He was so excited that he was shaking physically. After all, his dream in life was to live forever, and although that dream had not yet been realized, he had just taken a major step in the right direction. The idea of being able to live for thousands of years instantly caused tears of joy to well up in his eyes. Worth it. It was all worth it. Leaping to his feet, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously, dancing up and down in happiness. Just when he was about to go run out and do a few tests to see how strong he was, his expression flickered. Things aren't over yet, he thought. In that moment, he could tell that his transformation was not yet over. His cultivation base had broken through, and yet, he still had another core inside of him that was now breaking apart. It was his undying heavenly king core. This was the core formed by reaching the 3rd level of the undying codex. The power which had slowly been building up in him as he practiced that 3rd level was now causing his undying heavenly king core to break apart. At this point, Bai Xiaochun's eyes shone with bright light. I can borrow the power generated by my cultivation base breakthrough to destroy the shackle of the third level. He quickly settled back down cross-legged. He had pushed his undying hex to the level of the Great Circle all the way to the point of making contact with the shackle. Now that his cultivation base had broken through, and his undying Heavenly King core was falling apart, his life force began to surge with incredible power. Rumble. A tremor ran through him, and he suddenly got the sensation that 3 huge mountains were resting on his shoulders. That indicated that there were 3 shackles remaining, shackles which limited his fleshly body power. Now, with his life force flourishing, and with his core falling apart, it was time to destroy that third mountain and break through that shackle. Crash. Rumble. Rumbling sounds filled him as he drew upon his life force and the energy generated by his crumbling undying Heavenly King core. It created an indomitable blast of energy that he sent directly toward the shackle. Cracking sounds immediately began to ring out, and he could feel that mountain falling to pieces. As it did, the shackle vanished. He immediately felt much more relaxed than he had ever been before, and at the same time, could sense his fleshly body power soaring upward. Power coursed through him as his battle prowess rapidly increased. He excitedly rose to his feet and took a step forward, whereupon a sonic boom echoed out, and he vanished. When he reappeared, he was several dozen meters away. My fleshly body can pierce directly through the air. Spirits soaring, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Moments ago, he hadn't used his nascent soul to teleport but rather, had pierced through the air with his fleshly body, producing almost exactly the same result. If anyone were here to witness the matter, they would be shocked. After all, when nascent soul experts fought, the fact that they could teleport was vitally important, and was why numerous methods were often employed to prevent teleportations. However, such methods would be useless against Bai Xiaochun. He could use his fleshly body to teleport. As of this moment, he was not powerful in the simplistic sense of the word. He was powerful in a completely flabbergasting fashion. He could crush anyone in the mortal Dao nascent soul stage, no matter what techniques they used against him. In fact, someone with a mortal Dao nascent soul, even 1/2 a step into the Diva realm, could be easily crushed. Even if he met someone who had used Diva beast souls to reach the great circle of the nascent soul stage, he could easily defeat them. It would be the same with someone like that in the mid-nascent soul stage. The only person who might possibly cause a problem for him was someone 1/2 a step into the Diva realm, who had reached the great circle of the nascent soul using Diva beast souls, and also had some unique trump cards to use. Bai Xiaochun had never fought with someone who was 1/2 a step into the Diva realm and had used Diva beast souls to reach that level. However, he was still confident that he would be able to win against them. Being able to crush someone and simply defeat them were 2 very different things. Crushing someone didn't require a fight, whereas defeating someone did. Furthermore, Bai Xiaochun was currently only in the early nascent soul stage. If he reached the Great Circle, then he would be even stronger than he was now. I really am too strong. Patting his chest, he probed his cultivation base, heart filling with nearly uncontrollable anticipation. Bai Xiaochun began to laugh loudly at the sensation of being able to look disdainfully out of the corner of his eye at all creation. Swishing his sleeve, he proudly said, "From now on, not a single person under the nascent soul stage will ever dare to raise their voice to me." After reveling in the sensation for a long moment, he took a deep breath and then thought about the 4th level of the Undying Codex, and burning anticipation rose up in his heart. "It's too bad that I don't have any nascent soul level techniques at the moment," he murmured. "But at least I have a fleshly body technique to practice. The 4th level of the Undying Codex is the Undying Bones." With that, he thought back to the introduction of the Undying Codex, which described the 5 levels of skin, flesh, tendons, bones, and blood. The more he thought about it, the more he anticipated making more progress. After all, the Undying Bones level involved refining all of the bones in one's body. That would lead to increased defenses and greater strength, a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering transformation that left him feeling very excited. The Undying Skin focuses on defense. The Undying Flesh is about strength. The Undying Tendons are for speed. And the Undying Bones combine defense and strength together to reach shocking levels. Shaken, he thought back to the information about the Undying Bones, which was broken up into 4 sub-levels, each of which was further divided into 9 strata. Tempered Bones, Powered Bones, Heavenly Bones, Undying Bones. Tempered Bones involve a full transformation of the body, leading to an explosive rise in defenses. Powered Bones increase one's overall strength to a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering degree. Heavenly bones fuse strength and defense, making it possible to rock all creation. Last are the undying bones. By cultivating to that level, even if your soul perishes, your bones will never cease to exist. The soul can perish, but the bones are undying. That fits perfectly with the technique. The Undying Live Forever technique. I'm practicing the Undying Codex, which focuses on the undying aspects of the Undying Live Forever technique. This train of thought soon led him to the final level of the Undying Codex, the Undying Blood. What pushed him toward the brink of madness was the fact that the description of the undying blood had closing words which said, "With one drop of blood, the body can be reformed." I definitely have to finish cultivating the undying bones. Then I can move on to the undying blood. With that, he began to review the secret technique of the undying bones. Every level of the Undying Codex came with a unique secret magic. The first three were the throat-crushing grasp, the mountain-shaking bash, and the undying hex. All of them had proven to be very useful. Furthermore, as he continued to cultivate the undying bones, they would continue to be part of his arsenal. Undying Emperor's Fist. Fleshly body power found its foundation in the bones, and was unleashed through the skin. By blessing that power with secret magic, it became so explosive that it could shake heaven and rock the earth. That incredible power surpassed both the throat-crushing grasp and the mountain-shaking bash. The undying bones was another level, and it was the same with the Undying Emperor's Fist. Upon reaching the third stratum of the tempered bones level, one could unleash double the base power of the Undying Emperor's Fist. At the powered bones level, that power would increase to triple. With heavenly bones it was quadruple, and at the undying bones level, it was 5 times as powerful. Theoretically speaking, there was actually no limit to how powerful the Undying Emperor's Fist could be. It was only limited by the limitations of the body itself. That was the Undying Emperor's Fist. The secret magic of the 4th level of the Undying Codex. Powerful and magnificent, it could shake all creation. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.